fans, welcome back to Room 237, and this is another review from my Criterion collection. And it's a movie that I've known about for quite a while, always wanted to see, finally got to see it. And I'm sure this is going to be a video that I'm going to get a lot of people excited for the wrong ways. One, because of who the director is, a very hot topic director. And two, kind of like David Lynch, this movie does have a lot of ambiguities and a lot of different interpretations and meanings. There is a grounding to its meaning, like there is something there, but a lot of people interpret different things in different ways. And when you have a movie like that, there's always people quick to just denounce everything you know, tell you, well, you really ought to go check it out again so that you know what I know, making sure everyone else knows that I know that I know. We'll see how it goes. But it is, and of course, the director is Roman Polanski, which I'll get to. But it is his, I believe it's his second film. And I also believe it's his first English-speaking film. But 1965's Repulsion. Again, this is the Blu-ray from the Criterion collection. Now, there is the big topic of separating the art from the artist. And because of who Roman Polanski is, without going into it, if you don't know who he is personally, you can look him up on your own time. It's nothing I'm going to get into in this video. In fact, I think I've even gone into it before. I think the only movie of his I've actually reviewed is The Tenant, but Rosemary's Baby is one of my all-time favorite films. I loved this film. So if you don't know who Polanski is, just look him up. You can read about what he did, what he's known for, and why he's no longer allowed back in the country, or why he won't come back to the country. But in some instances, such as Polanski, if it's something he's already done, even before the fact, I can separate the art from the artist. Now, I'm not going to say anything about him in his personal life. I'm just going to be judging this film on its merits by itself. So all of that aside, and I'm sure there'll be someone saying, he's a monster, how could you? You're part of the problem. I really enjoyed this film. Now, this is part of his Apartment trilogy, which I think started with this and ended with The Tenant. I'm not sure what the second one is. I can't remember. And it's not saying here, which I probably should have guessed, but is part of his Apartment trilogy about someone within their own apartment, pretty much descending into their own madness or psychosis. And it is all in black and white, which I love. It does help a lot of the scenes in the atmosphere. Okay, so it is Rosemary's Baby. So it starts Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant. And this is definitely a psychological horror film. It goes at its own pace. It is a rather slow pace up until it gets to a certain point. Then, it really picks up. A lot of great visuals in here. The music I really enjoyed. There's been a lot of comparisons between this and Hitchcock's Vertigo. Because even the opening shot of the film, which the star of the film, Catherine Deneuve, who plays Carol, it's a close-up of her eyeball, and the credits are just kind of rolling roundly, like around her eyeball, even going under her eyelids, and then it kind of pans out, and then the credits are going kind of crazy. And the only one to go straight across is the last one, directed by Roman Polanski. Now I want to get who did the score, because while Bernard Herrmann's score is, very big. Chico Hamilton did the music for this, and a lot of the recurring themes of the score is what I think is kind of like what's going on in her head. Because when she's walking by herself or she's alone in her apartment, there's like this repetitive drum roll, like fast drum roll, and then it becomes accompanied by a trumpet. I really like the score. I love the visuals. There really was, I think, one jump scare partway through the film. I thought it was earned because there's so much tension already in this movie. Even if you have a very base idea as to what this movie's about, which, I mean, on a very objective base level in this somewhat ambiguous film, Carol is this woman who, she is very beautiful, but she's also very shy and distant. She has this very intense kind of blank look all the time. She lives with her sister Helen, her older sister, who has a lover who Carol's not the biggest fan of. And she's very distant to everyone. And, she works at the salon as a manicurist. And as the film goes along, she becomes more and more distant, more and more deeper into her psychosis. And we see that a lot of the fear, paranoia, psychosis, whatever it is, stems from a repulsion of seemingly the male sex. Whether it be something that general or even deeper than that, the male sex, specifically sex, like sexual feelings. And, a lot of the sexuality towards her, whether it's very upfront and intense, as we see parts throughout the film, or even just her in general, it leaves her in this state of just in a daze and stuck and trapped within herself. I mean, there have been people that have analyzed this film and come out with, she's asexual, she's a lesbian, she's a trauma victim, a sexual trauma victim. I will say at the ending, it does give us a very blatant clue or answer as to what it is. But I mean, people have speculated on who she is in that regard since. Now, the bulk of the film, or the main events of the film, is Helen goes away on holiday to Italy. They live in London. There is this guy named Colin who is in love with Carol. And it does, the first act of the film does kind of play it off like men are only after one thing. Like this guy that Helen is seeing, we hear them go out, they leave Carol at home, and then when they come back, Carol's trying to sleep, but Helen is very loudly having sex in the next room. And it does get louder and louder and louder as the scene goes on. I mean, she's pounding her pillow, she's trying to cover her head and her ears. I think that happens a couple times in the film. Colin, who is, a pretty handsome enough looking guy, he's kind of perplexed because he doesn't see why she won't really give him the time of day or really talk to him. At one point, she's walking home from the salon. He picks her up, but she struggles to speak to him. He drives her home. He goes to kiss her, and that doesn't go very well. She jumps out of the car, I think even hits another car with the door, and he's like, well, what the hell? And really, the main events of the film is when Helen and her lover go away to Italy. And they leave Carol by herself. They leave her to her own devices in the apartment. And in that respect, it kind of reminded me of Eraserhead. Because, yeah, it's black and white. Polanski does have films that are left purposely kind of ambiguous or left to be further analyzed, like David Lynch. And in this, you have someone who has something going on upstairs. They're left alone in their apartment, and this mental chaos ensues. My favorite scenes are the ones when she is left alone, and we just kind of see how she takes care of herself, how she gets through the day. One recurring theme or image is she is walking home from the salon and she comes across this crack in the sidewalk. And she seems kind of upset by this crack, or at least she looks upset. And then one of her hallucinations, which there's plenty of in this film, when she's alone in this apartment, is that the walls and the ceiling start cracking. And I think that is a visual representation of the crack in her psyche, in her mind, the crack on her grip of reality. At several points, she even barricades herself in the apartment, and as we see these cracks going along the wall, at several points, there's this hallucination of a dark figure that does attack and assault her. And one thing that I thought was interesting and that made it really effective and creepy is there's no sound. Like at one point, she opens this door with a mirror, and in the mirror we see this dark figure standing in the corner of the room. There we get like a loud music jump scare, but in the scenes where this figure attacks and assaults her, it's like we can see that she's screaming, but it's all silent. We just hear like the ticking of a clock. And I think each one of these instances, the 2 or 3 times that occurs, is there's some sort of male attention brought to her head. Because when Helen's lover stays over, the few times that he does, he has a habit of leaving his straight razor and toothbrush in Carol's cup or glass in the bathroom, and she hates it. In fact, she even throws it away, which Helen brings attention to. But then when she's left alone in the apartment, like when they go away on holiday, she sees one of his shirts lying in the bathroom, and she throws it away out of disgust. But she doesn't just throw it, she sniffs it. Like she kind of, like she goes to throw it away, but then she picks it up curiously and like sniffs it, and then she goes to vomit. And at one point, and directly after that, she goes in her sister's bedroom, finds a dress that Helen wore when she went out on a date with this guy. She kind of holds the dress up to herself, and that is when the dark figure comes and assaults her. So I think there's some sort of sexual thought that is brought to her mind each time it happens, and that is sort of a could be a representation of the sexual oppression that she feels. And I do think that the major films in this movie is the sexual oppression, trauma, repulsion as a result of the trauma. And also just some of the other very well done scenes that are done, or sort of weird, trippy, psychologically scary scenes, is when she's alone in this apartment. And it definitely makes it super atmospherical. Like there's one part where she's walking through an apartment, and it seems like it's X scale bigger. Like the hallways are higher ceilings, wider hallways, far bigger rooms. The furniture is more or less the same, but it's like when she walks in the bathroom, the tub, the sink, and the toilet is like way off in this corner, but the bathroom is much bigger. There's a scene where, and actually, well, no, this is still part of the sort of hallucination. There's all these holes in the wall, like the walls are cracking, but a hand like breaks through it and like grabs her. And that's something that happens a few times. Another time it happens is there's a number of hands, like she walks further down the hallway and it grabs her by the throat. Another one comes up, grabs her by the chest. Another one comes out and grabs her like around the waist. And she kind of has a look of sexual ecstasy for a very split second, like just a very, because then it cuts, and each time something like this happens, she's awoken on the floor or in bed. And then the last time that happens, like when we see the hands coming through the wall, it's actually like an effect, like the wall's kind of made out of rubber, almost like a Friday the 13th effect. We kind of see like the fingers poking through. And then when it finally breaks through, it doesn't look like a break in the wall. It looks like the arm is part of the wall and she has to like crawl under it. But what brings on that final bit of insanity is, she's missed days of work. And, well, first, she's at work. She's doing a manicure. She's cutting the cuticles of this elderly woman, and we just see this blank stare. We see up close to this woman as she's relaxing, and then she screams, and we see blood on her finger. She cut her. The boss sends her home early. And then while she's home, the landlord comes over. And the landlord, we already get that they're low on rent. We hear on the phone with Helen. Helen says, I'll have the rent for you tomorrow. I'm not going to be here, but Carol will give it to you. So he's come to collect. And, he sees the state that this apartment is in because she's been by herself for days. And so she gives him the rent. He counts it. It's all there. And then he starts looking at the state of this apartment. And, he sees like an uncooked rabbit that's been rotting throughout most of the film. At one point, one of her co-workers even finds the rabbit's head in her purse. He tries a sexual proposition to Carol, saying, if you take care of me, you won't have to worry about the rent. He tries to rape her, and she knocks him off of her, and then she takes her sister's lover's straight razor. And when he goes to kiss her again, she cuts him on the back of the neck, and then she just attacks him, and hacks him to death with it. Then, he's on the couch, dead, which I like the way the couch looks, like with the black and white, the lighting of the scene, the way there's blood all over it, sort of this weird angle. She flips the couch over so he's like hidden underneath it. Then that guy Colin goes and checks on her, and she kills him, and she drags him to the bathtub. And like right before the landlord came over, she's musing at this family photograph, but we don't really see it up close. And I'm going to say spoilers here because this is a movie where people talk about the ending a lot, and the ending is really where the answer to everything is, and I don't really want to spoil it. I know people have their hang-ups on Polanski, whether they want to see any of his films or not, whether they think they'll be good or not. If you can separate art from artist, and you do like his films, and haven't seen Repulsion and don't know how it ends, definitely see it. I highly recommend it. It kind of reminded me of like a movie that came out around the same time, Carnival of Souls. actually reminded me of that a lot. I really like Carnival of Souls. It feels like a much better made Carnival of Souls. So I'm gonna say spoilers here. Uh, so yeah, spoilers. uh, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm leaving a lot out. It's just there is a lot of ambiguities to this film, except for the final shot. The final shot does answer on a very base level why she feels this way. And what really makes this movie great is a lot of the visual choices, how it's shot. Well, I think black and white was still the norm, but it does help out a lot anyway. The sort of minimal music, like other than the drum roll, like when the film opens, it's kind of like this slow drum beat. But shortly after she kills Colin, Helen and her lover come home. And Helen sees the state that the apartment is in. And while her lover, who I've called this entire review, I think his name is Mike, is bringing stuff inside, he hears her scream. She's hyperventilating. He smacks her out of it. She points to the bathroom. He goes in the bathroom, and similar to the ending of Rosemary's Baby, we don't see what's in the tub. We know it's Colin's body, but we don't see it. And I think that was a very good choice. We don't need to see it. I know there's people that would be like, they should have released a cut where we can see it. They should do a remake of Rosemary's Baby so we can see what the baby looks like. It takes away the power of the scene. Everything else is done, so it's the reaction of the characters that know it's horrific. Not seeing it is where the power is. So Mike goes out to get help. Helen is sitting on the bed, and a hand kind of comes out from under the bed, and she knows it's Carol. And by this point, much of the building's neighbors are all flooding into the apartment. And Helen kind of motions that there's someone under the bed. They lift it. It's Carol in a catatonic state. Mike lifts her up to carry her out, and he stops and he smiles at her. And I think that smile is to symbolize because he's mentioned to Helen before that she needs to see somebody. And she kind of rebuffed that idea. So now it's like she has to. I think a neighbor finds the body of the landlord, but he turns the light off so no one else will see it. But after he carries her out, the final shot of the film is like this close-up tracking shot of everything on the mantle. Then it goes down to all the stuff on the floor. And we see the family photo that she was looking at, and also the landlord picked up and looked at before he attacked her. And we see people in the family are looking at the camera and smiling, except for this one little girl who is just blankly, seemingly angrily glaring at the adult male in the photo, assuming it was her father. Could be her grandfather, but I think it's her father. Assuming that there was sexual abuse, trauma. It started at home, and that's where the whole repulsion of sex started. Or even the male sex in general started. And all that trauma was undealt with, but she did have those natural feelings, longing and lust for sex, and it created a confliction. Like it was the oppression and the repulsion of which that the natural lust and desire for were starting to combat each other. And I think that's what was creating this hallucinatory, madness descending storm in her head. I thought this was a great movie. And I'm sure there's going to be people, automatically hitting dislike, even if I said something they agree with. Maybe it's because they like to think they're the only ones with those ideas. in that critique and that analysis. But a movie with and the grounding is the photograph. That is the proof that she is repulsed and oppressed by sex because of trauma that started at home. But there are plenty of ambiguities throughout the whole film as well that people can analyze and interpret. And when you have a movie like that, even if it's something like The Shining, where there's really no wrong answers, people will just be like, go watch it again so you think what I think, so that you're as correct and right as I am. But that's that just goes with the territory of internet, where everyone's right except you. So, definitely a favorite of mine, of Polanski's work. I've seen all of his early work up to The Tenet. I saw a couple of films. Like I did see Chinatown. I saw that in a film class in high school. I just haven't reviewed very many. I only own this and Rosemary's Baby. That would still be my favorite, but this is my second favorite. This movie did such a great job at just creating this tension along with isolation. There's also this great scene, like right before Helen and Mike come home, where Carol is laying in bed. She's looking at the ceiling. And the ceiling is just getting closer. So the apartment seems to be expanding and shrinking on her in her mind. Great visuals. Definitely a great physical and a visual representation of what's going on in her head, what she's hallucinating, done very well. I do think the black and white helps it. I only say that because I know a lot of people disregard black and white. The score is very fitting. I love that repetitive drum roll whenever something gets really intense or when she's by herself. Catherine Deneuve. I'm going to pronounce her last name. The woman that plays Carol. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with these names. She did a great job. I mean, some people will say it's just her staring, but I really bought that she was mentally struggling with this, and that she was this woman just descending into madness and psychosis with just this lifelong trauma that was never resolved. And now there seems to be this clash with longing and oppression and repulsion. Really enjoyed this film. It did remind me a lot of Carnival of Souls and Eraserhead. I would still say Eraserhead is more of a favorite film of mine than this, but it is along those lines, kind of, in some aspects. I loved Repulsion. Can't wait to see all the comments saying, yeah, I knew you were going to get it wrong because you said something different, and how many automatic dislikes I get just because I'm talking about it for all the various reasons. But anyway, that's Repulsion. I loved it, and thank you for watching.